When the wind blows cold on the shores of Lake Erie, the Queen City moans her sad, lonely song. Her streets are empty, but for handfuls of scattered souls, scurrying to escape the chill. Most are gathered at the warm watering holes that garnish every street corner, offering respite for the weary. The air hangs thick and is warmed by the hot takes that resound from the wooden walls. We find ourselves on the doorstep of such a place, with the champions of mediocrity about to set off on another long-winded journey. The windows are already beginning to fog with the balmy bloviations. As the door creaks open, a rush of warm air ushers the velvet voices of the 716 Sports Podcast.
Hello. Welcome back to 716 Sports Podcast. We've been gone for about 2 weeks, 3 weeks? About 3 weeks now, huh?
3 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
I've been gone a lot longer than that.
Yeah, well, Steve's here. Yeah.
Oh, that was Jeff. It looked different, but apparently that's Steve.
I did listen, though, and I did hear the shout-out when you guys were like, Steve hasn't been here in forever.
Yeah.
And I cried one real tear. It rolled down my
Single
left
and
cheek.
solitaire.
You know you missed Desperado. Come
Like
on.
the Native American thinking about pollution. It's tragic. Yeah, this is going to be a bit of a free-form show tonight.
It's always good.
Everybody's cleaned out their lockers. People are reloading their lockers. People are retiring on Twitter. People are jerks for being honest and jerks for trolling.
And Sammy Watkins isn't even a person.
Sammy Watkins has achieved a higher level of existence. It's pretty cool.
He didn't achieve it. It happened.
I mean,
it's not even achievement. He was
it
born
was just
this
a
way.
thing.
I was out there this summer, and I mean, the barbecue is great. So don't get me wrong. There's some weird shit that could possibly happen. But my God, that guy's been out there for 2 months, and all of a sudden he's a member of a cult, apparently. That's pretty cool.
Literally life-changing barbecue?
What's up?
Literally life-changing barbecue?
Well, I mean, it's
Form-changing
the best in the
barbecue.
country. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a big fan of Kansas City style. Just
Yeah.
to be.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, let's not talk about my trip to Kansas City last summer. Let's talk about other things. Let's talk about relevant things. Relevant things.
So, I can't. I'm kind of over this Ryan O'Reilly thing, to be honest with you. It's pretty...
We had a little back and forth.
I feel like you went through the gamut of emotions over this,
yeah.
Justin.
Where do you currently
The
sit?
thing is, my thing with... A little backstory, me and Billy got in a fight in our Slack chat, but it's because I made up a quote in my head that wasn't true, so I changed my entire perspective on the whole thing. But,
So what did you think he said, and what did he say?
Well, I thought he said, I'm excited to have something to play for again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what he said.
What was it?
And he said, I'm excited to go over and have something a chance to win something again.
Yeah.
Which is I'm excited to not play on this bad team and have a chance to actually succeed in a hockey team.
Did you guys see Ziglis's cartoon over it?
Yeah,
I thought it was trash.
pissed about that, dude.
I thought that was not good because it's not true
I posted on
of
Facebook,
O'Reilly's
said,
character or of the situation.
It was totally cherry picked and just I don't know, just typical Buffalo News bullshit.
Well, I'm so tired in general of if the best argument that you can come up with is, well, they get paid a lot of money, so they should be happy. That's complete trash. And I'm sorry that they get paid a lot of money. That's the people that complain that he makes a lot of money and should be happy are the same people that tend to be like all about free market. So which one do you want it to be, guys? You got to pick one or the other. So it rubs me the wrong way. And, my thing was just, when it comes to, how much attention we give, rightfully so, to mental health these days, and people are just worn out. Like, happiness doesn't mean that you're making 8 figures. It just doesn't at this point. So, to me, I was fine with what O'Reilly said from the jump, because I think he was just being refreshingly honest, and that's what we want our athletes to be, is candid and honest, and then we jump all over them when they're not.
And the other side of it, too, is the take that I had is on a team that is starved for talent, some people are going into attack mode against one of the most talented players on this team. And when you are starving for talent and you are disgruntling or blaming the guy that isn't the problem, on a nightly basis, Ryan O'Reilly playing 21 minutes and winning every faceoff, killing 4 penalties and scoring on the power play is probably not the problem on this team.
No.
And the last thing you want to do is ostracize him. He didn't diss the city of Buffalo. He didn't diss the Sabres organization. He said it's been hard to play here, and he's not wrong. But if they are not careful, this is the kind of situation where one of the few guys on this team who night in and night out was actually a solution to the problems you have. You have to be really careful not to disgruntle him. Not that you have to handle him with kid gloves.
No, not at all.
Man, you cannot ostracize a guy who is not who's going to be part of the solution going forward.
Buffalo fans don't know how to put things in perspective, though, when it comes to their athletes, when it's with the Bills and the Sabres. They don't know how to put things in perspective. They look at somebody and say, oh, this guy's a problem, when no, they're probably really not the main problem. Yeah. I mean, last year, the goaltending wasn't the number one issue. There were a lot of issues in front of the goalies, but the first person to get all the blame was Robin Leonard.
Mm-hmm. And this year, Leonard hasn't been as good, and the combination kind of, it got even worse this season with even more porous defense in front of him. But yeah, go ahead.
I found more respect in whenever I say it, because he was so blatantly honest, and he told what was on his heart. And he said, I lost the love for the game at points throughout the year. And it's totally understandable, because that team was bad. It's like having a job for years and loving it, and then you suddenly jaded.
Yeah,
and when you play in a team that's this bad for so long, and it's surrounded by so much negativity night in and night out, it's very easy to lose the fun in that.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And wasn't he on the bad Colorado teams as well?
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's been playing so long for bad teams. It's sometimes
I think
hard.
they may have had one or two playoff bursts in Colorado with him. But yeah, I mean, he has been struggling for a long time when it comes to this sort of thing. So we will get back to that and everything else, but we're going to take a quick break as we have our special guest on the line. So we will get that hooked up, and we will be right back. And welcome back, 716 Sports Podcast. We said we had a guest on the line. This is a big deal. We have Brian Duff from the Buffalo Sabres. You see him on intermissions and pre-games and post-games on MSG, and does a whole lot of other things in the community as well. Brian, thanks for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
We were just talking about Ryan O'Reilly, who has been one of several lightning rods on the team that you cover so closely, and his end-of-season comments, they were dissected. They may have been misinterpreted a little bit. A whole lot has gone on, and as the dust has settled here over the last week and a half since he's made his comments, what were your first impressions on what Ryan O'Reilly said on Locker Room Cleanout Day?
Well, I mean, he was struggling for answers right at the start of that scrum, and then dropped, a pretty significant line when he delved into, losing the passion at times, and the suggestion, although I don't think he said it exactly the way sometimes it was represented, but the fact that, that losing was being accepted. It's a tough one, because there have been many nights throughout a number of years, but specifically this year, where O'Reilly was probably the last guy I wanted to hear from after the game, because I think we knew what was going to be said. And that's not to take away from him on the ice. It's just, I think he was almost contradicting himself, or not necessarily putting himself in a good light, by constantly saying that, I got to be better, or it's on me. And okay, but if you keep saying that for 3 years, it's going to draw attention to you, and people are going to ask, why hasn't it changed, right? So I think that's the difficult part from Ryan's standpoint. Was he being honest, passionate, sincere? I can only assume yes. And sometimes, those words and feelings can be so unexpected that they can then set off a little bit of a wildfire. The one thing I'll say, you go into every season expecting, or if you're expecting the team to do better, you have to have significant individual improvements, i.e. career years close to it. O'Reilly is consistent, but again, by the way he speaks to the media, he expects himself to be better every year, and that hasn't happened. He's pretty much just been the same guy. I would say this year I felt like there were more ups and downs, and some of the downs were longer than in years gone by. And yet there were times when, you're looking at him in certain matchup situations, and again, it's hard to judge because this team was not in any meaningful games in the back half of the year. I can see on many nights where you would just try to project this team moving forward, and you would appreciate his skill set an awful lot more, like you would a Jonathan Taves. I bring that up because when Chicago was in, obviously the Hawks were in a down year, and Taves was just starting to get back a little bit of the scoring form that had kind of eluded him all year long. But you can recognize the intangibles that he has, which makes the whole picture that much muddier because what do you do with Ryan O'Reilly? You're a lesser team by moving him, presumably, unless there is, a significant deal and multiple assets that come back. So I think it's a fascinating story to watch unfold because obviously, we're at the 1 year mark basically for Jason Botterill almost, and he's got an awful lot on his plate, and it could involve, the moving of some very, very prominent names.
Brian, just strictly in your opinion, one more thing on O'Reilly. If he says this after game 45, after, a loss to the Bruins in mid-January, is the reaction from the fans and the media different because the games are continuing? Yeah, exactly. Or is it something that he would obviously never say because we didn't see this level of candidness really from almost anybody really over the season?
It's a great question. Obviously, it would trigger something significant simply because you don't hear that in season, in a locker room setting. Typically, when things go bad, guys blow up, but that's not usually what they would say when they blow up. I don't know. It's a tough one. I do think a little bit of this has been maybe overblown. I don't like saying that because I don't want to suggest that others aren't doing their job and presenting the facts the right way. I think what happens in a situation like this is the more people talk about it, the more it becomes a telephone game, and then people say things, and then they believe it, and it's like, no, that it's hard to dial it backwards, and get it back to the starting point for the casual fans that are having ongoing conversations about this, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I'm still struggling with why he had such what I thought were some prolonged dips this year, and knowing that he was wanting himself to be better. So and again, based on who he's playing with, how hard is it for him to take that next level and be better? Even though he's standing there saying, I have to be better. There is a reality to this. We all know that. We talk often about the wingers that are with Jack or the wingers that are with Ryan. And he didn't have Sam a lot of the time. He got Sam after Jack got hurt, right? So, it's tough. It's very hard to evaluate because you can only judge on what you've seen, but you also know that the roster isn't close to where it needs to be competitive, which, can ultimately bring out a lot more good things in guys. So is it on him to pull the group? Sure. He came here to be a leader. So in that sense, it hasn't happened for him.
Well, it's funny you mentioned leadership because I think a lot of fans are clamoring for Jack Eichel to be given that seat and to be given the captaincy of this team after, it was pretty obvious at times that there was no dominant voice or dominant captain on this team. Do you think that is something that we should expect opening night next season, that Jack Eichel is wearing the C for this team?
Yeah, I would say if there's going to be a captain, I think the odds would have to be the absolute highest that it would be Eichel at this point in time. I would be sitting here him and Han for a long time to try to give you the next best guess. I think if you were to ask me at the end of last year, although you wouldn't have been able to ask it to me right at the end of last year because this guy wasn't healthy, but let's say if you had dialed it back a month or two prior to the end of the previous season, I could have seen Opozo being in in the mix for it, certainly for a higher role, just because, you were going from Giunta, who was a lot older than the young core, to someone who's a little bit closer in age, but obviously would still, as this team kind of graduates out the older guys, Opozo would be on the higher end of the age spectrum. But I certainly have no reservations handing the captaincy to a young player. I was all in when Landeskog got it at 18 for Colorado, and I know a lot of people raised their eyebrows at it, but if you'd had any opportunity to meet Landeskog and follow his path through junior to the NHL, and the way he conducted himself, it was not at all surprising. I mean, I think, sometimes it's easy to accept North American captains and not as easy for North Americans to accept young European captains, which is rare. But I mean, Landeskog was captain in junior, which almost never happens. And it just speaks to his makeup and his leadership qualities. And, Colorado's not had the easiest time. I don't think it's been Landeskog's fault in any way, but now you're starting to see the benefits of it. And, I think it's great that McKinnon can be the standout there, but Landeskog can be the captain, because he's still obviously a top 6 player among the forward ranks there. And I think Jack, obviously, as he addressed the media on the final day, and as Bottrell talked about, and I think Phil has too, but there's been a lot of growing for Jack, but he'd be the first to say that there's still a lot of growth to be done, right? But at some point, I think if you I don't want to say push this on him, but when you project this letter onto his jersey, maybe that speeds up the maturation process a little bit too, right? Which can be a good thing.
There's always some excitement heading into the next year, whether your year goes poorly or not, with the influx of new players. However they come in this year, you had guys like Beaulieu coming in via trade, and so you have this influx of excitement. But with the Amherst and how well they're playing, and we can talk about them a little bit, it almost feels like there's a better sense of hope because of how good the guys are that we know will be in the future of this team. So with how much success the Emmerichs have had, this offseason feels a little bit different, hoping for some fresh blood next year. Talk to us about the Emmerichs and what we can expect from them both now, and then what we can expect as they translate either back into the NHL or into the NHL next year.
Yeah, I'm still, of the mind that for the Sabres, they have to have significant roster turnover if they're going to have, what you referred to as a fresh start, and a true feeling of we are different, we're going to be better. And what you want is unity within the group for sure, much like Vegas, which I know we'll probably talk about in a minute. That prevailing quality has been the best thing to happen to Rochester this year, is that they're, no matter at what level players' career paths are on, and whether they were undrafted, free agents, second-round picks, third-round picks, whatever, there has been a real sense of team togetherness there, which has been enjoyable to watch. They're a hard team for me. Like, I really invested a lot of time with Rochester this year, and I'm glad I did. It's just they're a hard team for me to pump the tires too much on right now, because I don't want people having unrealistic expectations. And quite frankly, the second half of the year was such a challenge for them that I'm not sure whether they should be considered likely to get out of this first series against Syracuse. Obviously, they benefit a little bit by their situation, the Amherst having the parent club not in the playoffs, so they get Buffalo's best assets from late in the year back to the squad, while Syracuse has some guys up with Tampa right now, which certainly changes the dynamic. So I'll say this. The second half was filled with injuries and a lot of call-ups from Rochester to Buffalo. So it was hard to judge them down the stretch. As they got a little healthier at the end, they looked better and, won 7 and had points in 8 of the last 10. The great thing about just looking at the Amherst right now is, even with, a couple of guys dinged up right now, they have tremendous balance potentially on their 4 forward lines, and they had 41 goals from the blue line this year. I mean, the Sabres had 18, right? So, and now I'm, unfortunately, and I have to temper that comment because, Zach Redmond did the bulk of it. Zach's not going up to help the Sabres next year in all likelihood.
No.
Right? And he's certainly not going to go up there and be a power play guy that scores more than 15 goals. But it did allow for others to have success and the group to, it would be, obviously the fan base would be far more excited if Brendan Gooley had led the team in scoring as opposed to Zach Redmond being the defenseman who led the team in scoring. But what you have to appreciate about it was that management went out and got certain guys. And Tim Murray tried. A lot of the guys that he brought in ultimately had some really long-term injuries and never quite helped the cause. And others just didn't work out. Whereas this year, it seemed like Jason Botterill got maximum contribution from a returning Kevin Porter, an incredibly unlikely offensive success story in the final quarter to half of the season in Colin Blackwell. Improved play and terrific face-off prowess at both ends of the ice from a first-year player in Sean Malone. Career years for guys like Sahir Gill, who's a free agent, Stuart Percy, and you were able to afford Gooley and Nelson an awful lot of time together. They were a fun team to watch because when you were mixing and matching veterans throughout the course of the season, it seemed like a lot of them had a ton to bring to this group. Andrew McWilliam also, not in Buffalo's plans, but was a really good fit for Rods this year. And the goaltending was terrific because Allmark was as expected, and for the bulk of the year, Adam Wilcox was really good. He had a couple of little rough patches, but I thought he played his role real well. So long-winded answer here. I mean, I think they can beat Syracuse just based on the fact that I love, bringing in Danny O'Regan just gives them another weapon up front and more balance, and he's been on a line with Porter and Bailey here to close out the year, and they looked really good. So I like the fact that some of Chris Taylor's best and favorite go-to players this year are literally playing on his third and fourth line. It just shows you the depth that he's got to work with, and you're going to need it at this point in time. So I'm just curious to see whether the names that are more on the tip of the tongue of Sabres fans, i.e. the Baileys, the Baptistes, the Fashings, the C.J. Smiths of the world, and of course Alex Nylander. I'm curious to see which one or how many of them have a terrific, memorable playoff, because that's really all you can hope for at this point in time. As good a year as it was for the Amherst, none of the aforementioned had such incredible offensive years that you would think this guy is automatically ready now, finally, to come up and help us. That's not the case. But what they can take from a round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds of team success, I think, is going to be most valuable because, again, there has to be a better feel within the group because it has seemed disjointed for an awful long time.
Do you think that translates into NHL success? I know you don't have a crystal ball, and neither do we, but it feels to me a lot like they're building for success, that they might translate that into the NHL. And of course, with Botterill's roots in Pittsburgh, you look at guys like Rust or Sheary or this year Zach Aston Reese, right? Is that his name? Like just these guys that it seems like a pipeline, and it feels like that's what Botterill's trying to build. That even if it's not the big name guys, there might be other guys who are in the plans, or you mentioned the depth. I'm trying to think of how many guys that have been key contributors might get pushed off the roster a little bit with Middlestat coming down and Gooley coming back down. That it seems like they might have a lot of able bodies to sustain success in Rochester and have that, for any Sabres fans, translate into long-term success for the NHL club.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Middlestat will ever see any time down there. The hope, obviously, would be that next season he just comes out of the blocks and is a Sabre. But you're right. I mean, that's kind of what's been lacking. And like a lot of this happened because, Tim Murray was trying to expedite the rebuild. And when you trade away first-round picks and or guys that are already in the system, like or were about to be in the system, like J.T. Comfer, your farm club was devoid of those high-end prospects that, we should all be fixated on. Jack didn't spend any time there, obviously. Sam didn't really spend any time there. And so it's different, to me, again, it goes back to, okay, build it from the team standpoint and let's see which individuals can make themselves better through that process. And I'll say this, I don't know why I feel this way, but I feel like this guy has been overlooked to a certain standpoint. If I'm, having to go Bailey, Baptiste, Fashing, because they're all the same age and they're, same experience level, I still think Hudson Fashing can play in the NHL. And I know his numbers aren't going to wow anybody right now, but I think when you watch his game night in, night out, I think there's an awful lot there that can ultimately translate on a team that plays the right way and plays better at the NHL level. And you know what? To be fair, I think the same can be said for Bailey and Baptiste. Don't come up here thinking you have to be the difference maker. But if this, if they are playing the right way as a team, which is fast, like, why can't these guys be any different than what's on Vegas? Because you can still, after seeing Vegas for 82 games plus 3 more in the playoffs, you can still look at their roster and cast a cynical glare at certain names and go, how is this guy, but as soon as you try to utter the sentence, you go, oh, I know why. Because that guy doesn't want to be the worst guy. Like, they all play the same way.
Not the least of which is Will
the first
Carlson.
game of the playoffs, that first game of that series against LA, and I've watched them all year, but I couldn't believe how fast third and fourth line and fifth and sixth D moved the puck and skated for Vegas. Like, you're sitting there going, who was that? And it's uncanny how Gallant has them playing and how they play for one another. And I know it sounds terribly cliche and old school and doesn't, bring in any analytic value, but you have to want to play for the guy next to you. Otherwise, you're a bad teammate. And or you're not living up to your end of the bargain, right? And I just think there are no passengers in Vegas. They simply play the right way, all of them.
It's pretty impressive what we've seen from them this year, and yeah, it's what we want here. And I always think that there's a little bit of resentment whenever for lack of a better phrase, a Sun Belt franchise does something. But the Vegas story it kind of transcends that. To win a division in your first season, like you said, those guys are playing for each other, no doubt about it, and they seem to want to play for Gallant, and they've put together, it's admirable what they've done in such a short time. And you look at what dysfunction exists in other franchises, or, perceived dysfunction exists in other franchises that have been established and around for decades now.
Right.
It's amazing.
It does make you wonder, even when you turn over the roster and turn over the roster and turn over the roster, yeah. It does make you wonder, and this is applicable to a lot of markets that have not found that long-standing success. Like, just why or how much does the past losing, like, how much does it linger, and for how long does it linger? Because the only advantage Vegas had was that there was no history. Now, there have been expansion teams before, though, and they just looked like expansion teams. So I don't know whether, because it had been so long since we had expansion, that because of the evolution of today's athlete, and in this case hockey players, because they've been so much better coached, because they understand that there is very little room for one-dimensional players, and because of the bitter disappointment of being let go by a team that they may have liked playing for. I don't know. I maybe it stands to reason that all expansion teams moving forward are going to be better, because in some cases they were built an awful lot different back in the day, right? Like, you were bringing in journeyman goaltenders, not Stanley Cup winners. You were dotting the roster with a lot of veteran forwards who were typically third and fourth line guys. And now, you know, McPhee's group had the luxury of just trying to get fast players, which didn't have, you know, we're comparing eras where, like, now a guy could be a free agent at 25 or 26, as opposed to an era where, you know, guys were hitting unrestricted free agency in their 30s. You know, it's a completely different mindset of how you shape your team now. Now nobody wants the guys in their 30s because they might not be just fast enough, right? So, I don't know. It's fascinating. It's the greatest thing, really, for the league. Everybody loves going there. It's almost like people were really cynical about Nashville when Nashville came in, and it took a long time to win over the diehards, right? The media, you know, especially the Canadian media, because they're critical of anything that doesn't, you know, appear to have roots to the original six. But
I'm sure PK Subban helped that a lot.
He did,
sarcasm.
But success did, and you know, even without, like, I loved the way David Poile built that team 2 decades ago. He was ahead of it. His expansion team, compared to the others that came in around that time, was by far the fastest, and they just didn't have guys that could score, because it was hard to score back then too. It was, you know, you're still in dead puck era and all the rest of it. But they did play the right way. And, you know, even before they got to the final last year, look at their history. Like, they're in the playoffs a lot. They just happened to, you know, they were like Buffalo of the 80s. I mean, you were always running into
Detroit,
Montreal, or Boston, you know, and so they were running into Detroit or San Jose, and they had some issues. But they were good. They were really good. And I, you know, I've always been a fan of Peter Laviolette. I think he's been just a terrific fit there for them. I think he's got an uncanny ability to just read in-game situations and know when to tweak. But now Poile's given him a roster that's so deep, you don't have to tweak very much, you know, because whatever you're putting out there is likely going to stack up well against the other side. It's very impressive. But all that being said, because they had the ability to get to playoffs, the fan base was really good. So people were already enjoying going there. It's just finally last year it blew up because they were on TV so much, and people that were really, really casual observers finally clicked in like, holy cow, look at that. And then it's like Vegas said, you like that? We'll up the ante one. And
nice
and they have, right? And they
nice
have.
pun.
Like, they absolutely have. And it's just to see how that fan base is already. And what about, like, last night? I mean, in L.A., there was a huge Vegas presence within the crowd. And, like, we're not talking in a market where the team hasn't had success. Like, the Kings have 2 cups this decade. They've got loyal season ticket holders. And that base was infiltrated pretty significantly by Vegas fans last night. So this is not an aberration. I don't see this going anywhere. I mean, and think of what they already have in the stable. Like, they had a lot of draft picks this year, and they've got a gazillion more coming. So, you know, they should be in real good shape for quite a while.
Well, Brian Duff, this has been an absolute pleasure. We thank you. Real quick, how's the progress going on the Alex Rice skate park? Because I know that's been something that's been near and dear to your heart.
Well, I mean, the weather's been perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Just beautiful weather here in Buffalo. Build way up to the sky right now.
We have had an awful lot of site work being done in the past couple of months. Just some incredible, you know, local companies that have gone above and beyond with their time to get the site ready for Independent Shotcrete, which is the contractor that is hired to actually build those skate park features, if you will. So that company is supposed to be arriving this week to get things going, and then the hope would be that if it's reasonable weather, it's typically an 8-week project. So the goal would be, you know, that by probably the draft, right, late June, we'd be talking about the park being open. So I would just say, you know, for people that are still interested in it, that they can follow at Rockin' for Rice on Twitter and go to alexrice.com, because once the picture becomes a little clearer as far as, you know, construction progress, everything will be updated on the site as far as and on Twitter and Facebook, you know, as far as grand opening and things like that. But we're really excited. We've, you know, it's been it's been 7 years plus. Well, 7 years this July since she passed, and 6 years that we've been active as a foundation, and a lot of hurdles to overcome. And this latest batch of bad weather is is just maybe the final one. But it's really exciting, and I can't thank you guys enough, and truly all the media. It has been obviously it was a story that really struck everybody, because we all know kids and we all want them to be able to get from one place to another safely, and when drinking and driving is involved, it's clearly an avoidable situation, but people have been really good at keeping Alex's name at the very least in the back of their mind, and they've shown that through their support for the skate park. So I can speak on behalf of our group and our board of directors that we're really excited to be making the final push here right now.
Awesome. Well, he's Duffer Sabres on Twitter. Brian, everybody can see you on MSG for Sabres pregame, intermission, and postgame with your new partner there this season. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on the 716 Sports Podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thank you again to Brian Duff. Hey, we're penetrating local media, buddy. Almost there.
He likes to talk hockey. He likes to talk the hockey.
It was awesome. That's a half hour plus of Brian Duff just waxing poetic, man. That's pretty sweet.
With him dropping answers like that and Marty Braun next to him, I don't know how they ever make it to commercial breaks on time.
Oh, hey, I was just thinking about this, Duffer, about how...
He shot the poke over there. And...
Nothing.
But also check out the Alex Rice Foundation. Anybody drives by Northtown Center, you can see the progress that's being made over there. Spring hockey is starting up for my son in a couple weeks, so I'll be over there every single weekend. But a great cause, and that's all we have to say about that.
Let's talk some more Sabres. I had a couple questions I wasn't able to get to because he was already on for half an hour, and I don't want to keep him any longer.
Yeah, we really again appreciate his time. But go ahead.
I wanted to ask about Alex Nylander. I want to see what you guys thought about it. Because a lot of media folk are saying that he's not even ready for the AHL because he just came over here from Sweden as an 18-year-old just because he could. And we're just trying to rush a rebuild. And people expect him to come in and be a world beater, set the AHL on fire, come in NHL and, a couple, maybe a few months in the season his first year. But, injuries kind of plagued him to start. And this year, too, he started out with an injury. And struggled to find his game down there in the AHL. And like I said, media folks saying he struggled to find, he's probably not ready for the AHL. And a lot of fans wanted to see him traded to help the team now, get some defense in here, whatever. But it's way too early. The kid's 19. But I heard he's coming they say he's coming up to the NHL, the Sabres, and I was like, I'm pumped. I'm watching the rest of these games. And they came up here. I thought he played very well. I mean, he back-checked, he forward-checked, he's in the corners competing for pucks, caused turnovers. There's one game he caused turnover, got the puck, and passed the post to him. He scored a goal. I mean, take a play for a cup of tea.
I was rushing him in because of his brother. I loved watching Marner, Matthews, and Nylander play last year. And I know that he's not his brother, but that definitely raised my expectations, as it would with anybody. If you have, two people that are related and one of them is automatic. Like, it was like when the Bills signed Gronkowski's brother. Like, there was this feeling of, like, the Bills have a Gronk on. He was not even on the team. Yeah. But, I admit that was part of why I had that. But I'm almost okay with him marinating a little bit because I think it showed. The goal he scores, he's going to the front of the net, kind of getting put on his wallet for it, but doing something that a lot of guys on this team don't do. Ironically, it seems to be Reinhart and he who are doing that, and they're not big guys. But I was impressed with that stretch. I did get to see him play in person at the last home game of the year. He did play in that game. Yeah, he played in the last home game of the year. I got to see him. I watched them all as well, but I was impressed. I'm with you, Justin. I thought he looked good, and I think he's got a real shot to make the big club next year. But I'm okay if he doesn't, because I think it's kind of crazy. We got a little bit out of whack with teenagers that come over aren't supposed to be NHL ready, right? They're supposed to have some time to play in the AHL and kind of figure out what the game is, and it's interesting to hear people thinking that that he was a disappointment at in his 18-19 season in the AHL against the probably better competition than he played over against in Europe or at any other level. So I'm fine with him taking another
half year, even a full year. I don't know if you want to bring up a kid and put him into the current situation that's going on in Buffalo, where you could potentially, I don't want to say poison another kid, but why not allow him to have that winning culture that he's getting down right now in Rochester? To me, that's more positive than trying to prove yourself up, basically trying to swim upstream in the NHL for a team that's not going anywhere for a little while. So,
but you got to anticipate that there's going to be a lot of players that are currently in Rochester coming up next year. So is there really a need to rush him just based on the fact you're going to be bringing in an influx of young talent, probably enough to replace at least almost all of the guys that really you kind of want to see off the roster next year?
Yeah, and to Steve's point, you say, I saw what they were doing in Toronto, and it's like, oh, well, he has the last name, right? But one of the hardest things to do as a fan is to look at somebody's famous last name and realize that they're not the other famous person, and they need their own timeline, and they have their own skill sets. And
Wayne Gretzky had a brother that played in the NHL.
Right. Who could forget Neil, Jeff?
The Sabres consistently...
Javier Gretzky.
The
Love
Sabres
that guy.
had the wrong Primo, the wrong Bork. They always had the wrong...
The wrong Nylander.
Yeah.
No, wrong Niedermeyer, though.
Even his,
Yes.
his dad, too. Marcus Naslund was a great NHL player. So he's got a pedigree behind
But
him.
don't worry, Lindy Rostai, we had the right Foligno. Wait, that was weird last night. We'll maybe talk about some ex-Sabre on Sabre Violence.
7 Sabres scored last night.
Yeah, and Foligno chop blocked Myers. It was really weird. Anyway, I'm fine with Nylander. Even if he takes 3 years to fully develop, then it's fine. He's 21 coming up, or 22. That's okay. There's no reason to accelerate somebody's timeline, and I don't believe. Look at what happened last time when we got rid of some prospects in the O'Reilly deal. Like it's kind of come back to hurt him a little bit. So there are guys that do take 2 or 3 years, and that's okay because they're trying to figure it out.
One way to look at this is the old Detroit model, where they would have guys sitting in Grand Rapids for so long, and when they came up, you knew 100% they were ready.
And Nashville did the same thing. They basically imitated what Detroit was doing when they left guys in Milwaukee forever, and that's okay. They let them over-ripen, as they called it, and that's fine. I think that's the better philosophy, especially given what you have right now. How many more young guys do you want to bring up? You can't have this team turn into the Edmonton Oilers of earlier this decade. That can't happen.
Especially since if you keep bringing up all these young guys, your captain is going to be, 22 next year?
Presumably.
Yeah, your Eichel is presumably going to be captain. He's only going to be, 22 next year?
Spoiler alert.
It's a proper way to build. This model you guys are referring to, and it's not sexy. It's extremely boring. You're not going to make the big flashy free agent deals. I forget who tweeted it, but they tweeted about Winnipeg and their lineup the other day. There was not a single free agent in the lineup. It was like
oh god, yeah, it was all trade or draft
players and like 3 or 4 trades
and one unrestricted free agent.
Yeah, it's not. It's like everyone wants everything now. They want to win now. Be doing good right away. But sometimes things gotta marinate. You gotta put them in the crock pot, baby.
And that's okay in a market like Winnipeg too. That's the only way that you're going to do that, because unless you got someone who just has a hankering to go back home to Manitoba, you're not going to attract. You're never going to get an interview with Steven Stamkos or John Tavares in free agency. So that's the way to do it. And Buffalo is unique because they have gotten, somewhat big name. I mean, Okposo was pretty big free agent signing a couple years ago.
He was the biggest available.
Right. And, they grabbed, it was a little bit different, but like when Matt Molson signed that 5x5 deal, everybody was praising it because he was in, even though he had a little bit of experience here, everybody was still in on that. So Buffalo's proximity to Toronto, it does benefit it, but there's also something to be said for player development. And we've seen improvement over the last few years with the relationship with the farm club, I think, despite what Amerks, like deep state Twitter says, which is a really weird portal to fall down into sometime if you really want to understand self-loathing on the internet. It's a really good spot to check it out. But because they don't know what they want to be happy. But yeah, the Sabres kind of neglected the farm club in order to accelerate something that was somewhat of a false prophecy. So they need to go back and build this the right way.
On the flip side, though, you have this kid that they've decided to burn the year of the entry-level contract because he's just that good, and Casey Middlestat, which is super exciting. When I found out Middlestat was playing the last X number of games, I said to my wife, we're going on Wednesday. Normally I worked second shift Tuesdays and Wednesdays. I didn't because the kids were off of school, and I follow the Kenton school schedule for my job. So my wife and I got tickets, and we sat in pretty good seats for like $40 a piece, and I wanted to see Middlestat play. Guy was unreal, pretty much a point-a-game player. His first goal, it was pretty sweet when the puck came to him in the slot, sitting on the couch next to my wife. My wife, who has not been a Sabres fan in 10 years because they're not worth her time, was intrigued by Middlestat enough because she saw him play, and it was really cool because the puck came to him in the slot on the power play, and I said, "Shoot it, Casey," and he ripped it into the corner, and that felt so good. Every part of my body was elevated and tingling a little tiny bit, and my wife was legitimately excited on the couch next to me. I think that there's a bit of renewed hope when things like this happen, when a kid who comes in and starts playing does put up a point a game and he looks like he knows what he's doing out there. I've been really impressed with Middlestat.
What I've seen of him, he just makes it look so easy out there. He doesn't, he's putting out the effort, but it doesn't look like he's actually putting out the effort. He just looks so smooth. He just looks like he's one with the ice and with the game.
One with the ice. Be the ball.
We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about like the turnover in his own end when Chad bailed him out. When he tripped over the face-off circle and lost the puck. But, especially in the offensive zone, he looks good and his vision is good. And I really hope he's on the wing for Jack next year because I don't want him playing third-line center.
His first game, he could look kind of like, oh, man, I'm playing in the NHL. And then he got that penalty, and then he was like a whole different player. He's like, oh, I'm just playing hockey here, and kind of went out and was a whole different player the rest of the game. But I like him at center. I don't care. I think if Ryan O'Reilly stays, I think he's like a $8 million third-line center down there winning faceoffs.
My concern is he's going to be flanked with bottom six talent. Casey, that is.
They didn't do it when he was up here at the end of the season. They put him with decent guys.
Yeah, he played with the first game. He played with Nylander and like Rodriguez, and then got bumped up to Jack's line.
One thing I want to talk about in this team, Duff talked about Ryan O'Reilly having a lot of long down times this season, but look at a lot of the guys he's playing with. He's playing with freaking Scott Wilson most of the year, and they had nobody good on his wing. Like that's the Sabres issue. They have no real wing scoring depth. Like there's always like one decent winger with Eichel or O'Reilly, and then just some guy who's probably not going to be in the league in 2 years on the other side.
It's a hard thing because you want the talent to match up, but then you look at I don't know what the Sedins did, and it was just they would just always get stuck with a random winger, but things work. Now
they were the Sedins.
But there are other pairs and duos throughout history that you can kind of stick the random third guy. I mean, with your team, how many wingers have Getzlaf and Perry played with?
Played with a few.
Right. So, who was the best of them? Bobby Ryan?
This year's Raquel. Rickard Raquel's been playing.
Right, and Raquel. Okay, so maybe Raquel is the best. But point is I'm okay with them having a duo, and I thought that they would have that eventually with Kane and Eichel if they stuck them together. Yeah, or Jack and Sam. And Sam certainly has turned things around here in the second half of this season. So, go ahead.
But if you get the right personnel, you can put together a duo and somebody decent third player. If you don't have that, you probably really need two of those sets to work. Mm-hmm. But you also need bottom line talent.
Oh yeah,
if you have too much bottom line talent, you have too many fillers going up to the top lines, and the Sabres really run into this.
And that's what killed the Penguins basically for between 2009 and 2016. Was they had no one in the bottom six. They were so top heavy.
Phil Kessel's a third line winger now.
Exactly. And that's all of a sudden, stupid circumstances that led to him, Steve Simmons on Hot Dog Gate, eventually leading to him coming to Pittsburgh. But still, hey, that's exactly what the Italians need, and now they're fine, and they're set and maybe making a third run here in 3 years.
My friend and I were trying to figure out how many top line players the Sabres actually have, like on the roster, and it could honestly be 2, like maybe 315, 20, 390. Like if you have a healthy, for lack of better terms, not physically healthy, but like a healthy roster, you probably like 4 to 5 top 6 guys, because then you can supplement. But when one of them is hurt or you trade away Evander Kane, now you have, like we said, Scott Wilson and Zemgus Girgensons playing top line, top 6 minutes, and that's a square peg round hole in my opinion. Unless they're flanked by 2 guys. If they're the third wheel to 2 guys who are really good, that's a different story. But the Sabres don't have that luxury. They might have 2 or 3 top line talents on their whole team.
I think I was talking. I might have put it. I forget what I was talking about it, but like, if you're a Sabres GM, there's 2 big issues on the team. Is defensive. There's a good defensive depth. There's not many good defensemen on this team, but there's also a serious lack of scoring wingers or talented wingers for that matter. If you're Jason Botterill or the GM of this team, are you looking to trade Sam Reinhart to get defensive help and really hurt your offensive production more, or you're going to trade Rasmus Ristolainen and hurt your defense and maybe help your forward core?
Well, I don't know after this season how much trading Ristolainen hurts your defense. I mean, he regressed this season. There's no other way to put it.
The team regressed.
The team regressed, but one person that stood out in that regression was Ristolainen. I mean, we all thought that Ristolainen preseason was going to take a big step up and under the tutelage of Phil Housley, because he was played too many minutes in Bosman last season. I mean, that was ridiculous that he was out there for 25, 26 minutes a game. Like that was didn't he, if he didn't lead the league in ice time, he was like, in the top 5. That's way too much of a burden to put on a young player like that. Everything took a step back. He's not, I remember we had a conversation with Matt Collier a few years ago, and we talked about, what's the upside of Rasmus Ristolainen? And he said he could be Victor Hedman. And that was, high praise, but also seemed very realistic that this guy is a top 5 play on both sides of the ice, be comfortable on both sides, and both the offense and the defense took a big step back this season. Now it's a matter of evaluating, do you think he can get back to that point or not? If you think he can get back to that point, I don't think you can trade him. If you don't think he's going to get back to that point, you're not going to get a whole lot for a guy that couldn't, maybe not, is maybe a bottom pairing guy on most of these successful teams now.
But he's also, you can't expect this early in his career that he's going to be a Duncan Keith or a guy like that in Chicago who are just eating up minutes.
No.
And
right.
That's
I think he was
miscast in 2016-17. The 2016-17 season, we talked about trying to accelerate the tank. Well, that was trying to accelerate a guy in his career, and I think everybody looked at the ice time and just assumed, okay, well, the numbers are so poor because he was still pretty good at possession, but the numbers were poor because of him being out on the ice for so long that he would just wear out. Shit. I know, what is this?
Playing with Josh Georges or whoever.
Right, like his partners were horrible most of the time. But after this season, I don't know. I don't know what to do with him. I think he's
still incredibly young.
He is. I think he, as confused as people were with Sam Reinhart at the end of last season, I think there's even more confusion about what type of player Ristolainen is.
I personally don't think Ristolainen is 1A. I think he's 1B, like meaning that he's not the number 1 guy. Maybe he's number 1 on the power play, but I think he needs a good defenseman with him. I don't think he is a Drew Doughty type player, but the good news is they're not paying him like he is 5x5. That's what you pay your second.
It's a very fair deal, in my opinion.
Yeah,
he's definitely top 4 guy.
If they get Dahlin, hey, then all of a sudden he can slot into a role. I think his role should be top pair defenseman, but not the guy. And he has been expected to be the guy, either too young in his career or maybe that's just not who he is. Time will tell that. I don't want to see them lose him, though, because, he's clearly the best defenseman out of the 9 they've put out there this year by a lot. I think he's head and shoulders, and I feel like that would be shooting yourself in the foot unless you get a killer haul back, but even then.
Definitely wasn't as good a year as in years past. He's also been on some very freaking bad hockey teams, but I find it interesting. He said he regressed. The entire team has regressed, and I think it's interesting because I feel like this year's roster was better than last year's roster, and I feel like Dan Bilesman got way more out of last year's roster than what Housley did this season. Am I wrong?
We all thought this team was going to be better than last year's team was. We thought at least at worst there was going to be an upgrade on defense from Georges, Franson,
and we thought that the moves were done to upgrade that.
Right.
The defense.
They brought in 4 new defensemen.
Even if
it didn't work.
Even if only nominally better, it was still supposed to be better.
And that's the confusing part is like, okay, and you bring in literally a Hall of Fame defenseman who has been an assistant on a club that went to the Stanley Cup final and was admittedly loaded on the blue line, but also seemed to exceed expectations last year as well, and he certainly seemed to be a big part of that, and they were just waiting to finally hire this guy, and he just wouldn't get knocked out of the playoffs. So I don't know. I do need to see one more year. I think it's ridiculous to call for somebody's job after one season, but I'm willing to have a short leash. And the question then is, do you give Botterill another year, or are they a package deal?
I don't think Botterill's going to go that fast. You got to give GM time. I mean, the rosters take time to form. I think every GM should have at least 3-4 years.
Especially because his plan is to build it from the bottom up, and that takes more time versus Murray, who was building the team as if they were ready to win. Yeah. When Murray sits down with Pegula, he says, we're going to win, and they don't. When Botterill sits down with Pegula, he says, we're building to win. Yeah. Not the same thing.
Yeah, I got to give Halsey one more year for sure, but you can't keep changing coaches all the time. Definitely keep past this season, but just weird. Like I really think Bilesma pulled way more out of a lesser roster last season. And even look at the power play this year to last year. Number 1 power play in the league, and they were pitiful most of the season.
And that's Ristolainen, top power play guy. That's probably where he got most of his points. I don't know his power play to 5-on-5 scoring rate, but as the quarterback, of that power play, as the power play 1 tank, so does he. I mean, or it could be because he's been worse. I don't think that's the case. Like watching him play, he's not the problem on the power play. But of course, Ristolainen's numbers are going to drop when they went from the number 1 power play in the league to the basement, and he was the quarterback of it. So,
I guess I'm just concerned that power plays come and go, and the margins are so thin on the cumulative number of goals. Where I don't know if they scored 7 more goals, where do they rank? So to me, power play and special teams are like, overall like defensive rating in the NFL. Like it kind of has a natural wave to it, and you could be great one year and down the next and not really have a whole lot change other than some circumstantial stuff. So the power play thing doesn't. You would probably know better than me. I can't think of like a team that like over the last couple of years has just consistently had a killer power play, because it seems like one year when a team has a great power play, the next year everybody's just trying to figure out the magic and talk about, well, what happened on the power play. I don't know.
Going from first to 12 is one thing, but first to last is like, it's a big jump. I don't know. It's all super complicated.
I mean, I certainly think that there's something to be said about going that is an extreme, obviously, to go from first to last, but also at the same time, I mean, next year if they're 12th, what do you say then? It's just like they just figure it out. Yeah, but it's such a small.
I know what you're saying.
Game of inches. I that's why I don't know. Power plays they're fickle to me.
Mm-hmm. But speaking of power play, and they started getting really figuring out towards the end of the year. And Reinhardt looked really good down there in that corner, feeding O'Reilly in front all the time. But this one a shitty segue to Reinhardt, but he played really well the last half of the season, and all year long I was like, keep Kane, train Reinhardt. He's a bum. He's not doing anything. But the way he played at the end of the year really kind of changed my mind. If he could do that all the time, it's going to be a great player. But it really reminds me a lot of Drew Stafford. End of the year, contract year, he starts playing hockey all of a sudden, and it's kind of like that one year Drew Stafford, he's in the contract year, and he had 3 hat tricks in the last 2 weeks. He had 9 goals in the last 2 weeks, and then he got this $5 million contract. So it's one of his like your contract year confidence, and then just like
Stafford always scored his 30-goal seasons in 7 games.
Yeah,
he just the other 75
Super
he was just
streaky.
like not there.
What's your take on Reinhart? What do you think?
I think he was a lot more consistent than that. I think he got thrust into a bigger role when Jack went down. I think that now the team says, and it could just be speak, that he was listening to coaching all year, and he was honestly attempting to get better, and he listened to his coaches, and he changed some things about his game. I don't know if it was Bottrell or I think it was Bottrell said he was very coachable, and it might have taken some time for Housley's system. I'm using finger quotes in the air, but like I'm buying into that because it passes the eye test. He went from looking like he didn't know what his role was on the team to filling a very real need out in front of the net, tipping pucks, and just he looked legit. And it wasn't a 10-game set.
Yeah.
It was over the course of 30 games.
I remember we were talking about it when I called in after that Toronto game, the first Toronto game at the beginning of March, and yeah, he was a different player, especially as the calendar turned over. And sure, there's probably some human motivation involved with having a contract coming up and knowing that it's due, but at the same time, I'd like to think that he's still a young guy, and like, you know, we were saying, he needs a little coaching, and, you know, I think Steve's right. I think he was fairly consistent once he got to that level. It took him a while to get up to that level, 35, 40 games or so. But once he got there, second half of the season, I think he's a core player going through.
He played incredible and figured it out. I just was wondering if you guys thought that way. Like, do you think it's like a contract year thing, but
I don't.
Maybe I agree. Maybe he was listening to coaching, just figuring it out and learning.
I'd like to think that a young guy like that is not quite at a contract. I think, you know, I don't remember. I felt like Stafford was at least in his mid to later 20s.
Yeah, it was like definitely. I think it was a second contract.
Yeah, second or third, whatever it was.
Example, I kind of reached.
No, that's fine. I get it. Because yeah, Stafford still he had to move. I think it was in 2009 or 2010. We were at a Toronto game, and he put on one of the greatest dekes I've ever seen in human history. And it's like, who is that? It's freaking Drew Stafford. That's going to be on. That's the highlight of the season recap video, and Drew Stafford put it on. But Drew is just sort of, he's a little bit of an enigma when it came to scoring. He would, like Steve said, he would get 30 goals in the span of about 17 games, and that was about it.
So I know it's just about an hour here, and it's already 10:30, guys. I want to go, but I want to just kind of go back to Ryan O'Reilly real quick.
Yeah.
So I love what he said, obviously, about, I thought he's very honest and brutally honest, and I understand his losing the love for the game at times throughout the season, because it's hard to be in a team this bad for so long and be surrounded by negativity and the same media all the time, asking the same bullshit questions. But I find it's a very stark contrast from O'Reilly saying that to Jack Eichel having a halfway broken ankle and fighting to come back for the last 2 weeks of the season, saying, "Why wouldn't I come back? I love the game. It's just fun." What do you think about that stark contrast between the two players who are supposed to lead this team? And obviously, include the fans for crapping on O'Reilly for saying what he said, and then questioning Eichel for coming back.
Right, immediately after that question, we can't forget that Paul Hamilton asked him if he needed a change of scenery, and he said, "No. Like, I want to be part of the solution here."
I honestly believe that.
And right, if he was being honest when he said,
"Yeah,
I lost passion for the game," why isn't he being honest when he says that? Like, he was just I don't know. I'm taking him for what he said at everything, at each one of those things.
But what's your take on him saying I lost the love for the game at points throughout the season, and Eichel fighting to come back on one leg for the last 2 weeks?
But I think the difference is O'Reilly was coming here hoping to win. He leaves Colorado, who now is finding success. Granted, he got a nice payday in Buffalo, and we can talk about the money aspect. He did get a very nice payday, which is going to be part of the reason why he came. 7x7 is as good a reason as any to go somewhere. But O'Reilly's expectation coming in was, this is a decent team that I'm going to make better. I think Jack's expectation coming in is, this is a bad team, and he also didn't have a taste of playing somewhere else, and he's also only played 2 seasons, so there's a little bit. it maybe hasn't graded on him as much. O'Reilly went through some slog years in Colorado and was maybe hoping to get out of that environment in a new, fresh scenery, and hasn't found it yet. And, maybe it's even tougher the second time around. I don't know.
It's an interesting question because I tend to be more supportive of I am in the camp that I don't believe that Jack Eichel should have played the last 2 weeks. I think that I don't want to say that his attitude was selfish, but I do think that if he did re-injure his ankle, that would have put the team in somehow an even more negative situation than what we had previously.
Well, that's just Eichel being young and dumb, though.
The thing is,
Right.
It's a sprained ankle. It's coming back from a broken bone or a ligament. It's a sprained ankle. You're not going to do anything worse to it besides tweak it. And,
Man up.
I mean,
That's
my take
fair.
on it.
No, that's fair. I get that. Would you have wanted to go on Twitter the morning after he re-sprained the same ankle? I wouldn't. It would just been a complete
Kim was dead,
garbage
actually.
fire.
He was good. They took consider he had the same kind of issue behind the net. I was like, oh my gosh, you're hurt there again.
I'm totally in support of what O'Reilly said. I've been at a job for multiple years, and I've had long stretches where I didn't want to go every morning, and every morning it sucked, and you went because you were obligated to, and because you had obligations to individuals both at home and at work. And things do turn around, and in one way or the other. And my current situation at work is a lot better than it was, say, at this time 2 years ago. So I think that's just human nature. It seems to be universal to me, and the people that are upset at O'Reilly for being honest, I guess, just either really love their job or hate their job so much that they don't understand the disconnect.
Well, people don't seem to. There's a lot of people that don't think that being a professional athlete is an actual
It's a real job. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
they don't see it as the same way as all of us going to work every day and all that.
You get to play a kid's game for a living.
But they're still getting paid to show up. They have obligations to the team.
Right.
They're basically a pro athlete in addition to...
There's political bullshit that they deal with, that every
Right.
person deals with in their office. There's people that they don't like, that they have to, just like you don't like Cindy that's in that cubicle 2 rows over from you. Well, maybe O'Reilly doesn't like one of the guys that he has to look at every day in the locker room.
The team in the locker room
gotta
is
be
your
Josh Georges.
workplace.
Yeah, and you got to think
Everybody
about it.
hates Josh Georges.
You're going to work. You're going to work every day in a negative atmosphere.
Right.
And you're on a bad team, and you're constantly being. You're in that locker room with those guys wearing ice skates. You're with the team 4 to 5 out of 7 days of the week. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're constantly around it. You constantly got coaches. You're in meetings with coaches telling you all the mistakes you made and how bad you're playing and how reminding you of all the things you're not doing well. And it's really easy to get angry and frustrated and stop having fun. You know what I mean?
guess.
And it's easy to love what you're doing when you're doing well and that's fun. It's not fun to do shitty for 3-4 years, and that's all he's known here. And the team's been bad, and he brings a lot of attention to himself by saying, like what Duff was saying, I gotta be better all the time, putting it on him. So I guess that's on him, but
To me, like that's
I get where he's coming from.
the
I'm
real
saying.
Ryan O'Reilly actually showed up a couple weeks ago, and the robotic hockey cliche that is 98% of the league. I mean, it's just funny. Like, I would never compare Ryan O'Reilly to Sean Avery, but remember how much people hated Sean Avery because he was just different. He was just a different dude, and they hated him a little bit for his game on the ice too. But he said things that pissed people off because they weren't the normal cliche of what a hockey player is supposed to say. There's a real culture in hockey that you could score 4 goals, you could be a +5, your team wins 8-1, you're the first star of the game, and if you don't immediately just talk about your teammates and say what a great job they did, they were really the ones that were banging in the corners, and I just happen to be in the right spot at the right time. You know, like if you don't take that attitude and you're like, yeah, no, I fucking killed it out there tonight. I look really good, and I'm actually really happy with how I played tonight. Like, you would be ostracized from the sport.
Yeah. Can't go out there and be LeBron
So that
James.
culture is, which, you know, and as a fan of the NBA, it's very, the dynamics of the four types of player that you have in the four major sports. Hockey is by far the most robotic and the least interesting to hear. And we've made fun of the interviews that they do. And part of the reason is this is the reaction you get when somebody tries to be honest and not just speaking cliches.
Yeah.
So,
See, I hate to doubt. I hate to cast some doubt on O'Reilly, but how much do you think that there's any possibility, being one of the longer tenured players on the team in the league, that maybe he's taking a little more responsibility, trying to take a little more responsibility on himself than maybe he really should be? Well,
maybe. I think if you're an athlete at that level and you're wearing, like, I mean, he's basically worn a letter his entire time here, right? He's had the A. Essentially, when Gianto was hurt, he was the de facto captain over the last, the previous 2 seasons. He probably did, but at some point, I think he may have just sort of, I think this is the season where he really sort of examined what he was doing, and maybe he was trying to be honest, and maybe what he said at the, I don't think he was lying necessarily to anyone or himself when he was saying, I need to get better in those interviews. I think he believed it.
Yeah.
But I think after some reflection, he maybe came to the realization that hockey wasn't the be all end all. It wasn't the fun thing. It wasn't the distraction that it once was. And he was looking forward to playing internationally this off season. Right, yeah. But whatever it was, finding some joy and then coming back and saying it. And I think athletes are not articulate. They're not the most well-spoken people. They were taken out of school at very young ages to become professional athletes. So expecting them to be able to explain their emotions in some sort of articulate way. We've seen it firsthand with certain friends of the podcast when they've explained their experiences, and, even in the college level, it's tough. It's tough for them to be allowed to be individuals, and because you can't have individuals on a team, because then that distracts from the team effort, right?
And it's good too that he recognized the issues he was having mentally, and he said, I was probably not mentally strong enough this year, and it's hard when you're getting beat down constantly mentally in that kind of atmosphere. And it's nice that he recognized it, and that he said, but I think I know how to fix it. And it was alluded to.
And maybe
in
he
article.
does, maybe he doesn't.
It was alluded to in an article that John Vogel wrote, that I think is a pile of hot steaming trash. About his dad said that this is how he was raised, and that's how he was. He's not the most talented player, but he was raised to be a leader and a character guy, and this is what he does. So I'm confident he's going to figure it out, and I believe everything he said. I don't think he was saying it to get traded out of here. I really believe he wants to be here. I'm not trying to be a Ryan O'Reilly apologist. I just really believe what the guy was saying. It does come from his heart.
No, if you read what you and I were going back and forth with a week and a half ago, you would know that you're not trying to be an apologist for him. Absolutely not.
But that should be interesting to see what happens this offseason. It's going to be.
I would be shocked, and I think it would be a big mistake to trade him. But I guess that's up for management now to decide.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was kind of overpaid when he got here, but you got to convince a guy to be here. And when you're that bad, you got to pay a guy to want to play for your team. But I don't think he's not going to be a guy that puts up 80 points, 80, 90 points a year. He's going to come in here and win the faceoffs, which he just won the most in NHL history ever. Let's not forget about that. And he plays against teams. He plays out his team to shut down the team's top players. And he does.
Yeah, he's asked to draw arguably the toughest assignments of any forward on this team.
He's like Patrice Bergeron with slightly less assists. Let's put it that way.
You know what? I'll take a guy who can, when you face offs, play the 200-foot game and gives you fewer points over a guy who's one-dimensional, who may put up 100 points but isn't helping you on the defensive end.
I think he has the talent to put up 80 points. I just think he has the talent around him to help him do that. He's not going to be Jack Eichel.
Yeah.
Go coast to coast and make a highlight reel. He's going to be.
I don't remember what it's like to see a Sabres score 80 points in a season. So let's just get to that point, and that would be neat. I would settle for just one guy to crack 80 at this point.
They just lack talent right now.
They do.
And if Eichel was here all year, he probably would have cracked 80.
And guess what? If your primary skill on offense is assists, then you're really screwed on a team like this to try and get to that point.
I feel better. I got a lot of frustrations out today. I was kind of like talking on one breath the whole time.
All right.
You fade away sometimes.
It's okay.
But
All right.
it was a good show. I think it was a good one.
All right, so we're officially closing the book on the 2017-2018 Sabres season, right?
So moving forward to seeing some trades.
And now we're going to be a Ducks pod for another 72 hours, and then we got to wrap that up.
I don't want to be a bandwagoner, but I'm loving Vegas right now. I'm all about Vegas. I was thinking about buying a nice fleece today. I don't want to be a bandwagoner, but I just love what they're doing. I love the team's attitude. There's not a real, besides James Neal and Fleury, there's not a real superstar on that team. There's a bunch of guys out there playing as one solid unit.
What's cool is you said that James Neal is a superstar. I would say
superstar, but
no, I know what you're saying. Fleury, I still think to me Fleury is the face. I mean, I know Carlson's got all the goals, but to me Fleury is the face of that franchise at this point. I was going to say that the Lightning were the team that I thought actually has looked the best, but they lost 5-2 tonight in New Jersey. So who knows? It's the NHL playoffs. Complete crapshoot.
Last thing.
Pick a team out of
briefly, and then we'll go home with Steve. He's going to fall asleep right now.
I'm good. Honest.
I appreciate you coming today off the plane.
Yeah, I left
straight out of Tampa.
Yeah, I left the house I was staying in Tampa at 6:15 this morning. Traveled with a 14-month-old, but I'm good, honest.
You don't need your excuses, sir.
I'm good. I'm glad I was finally here. Damn, I missed you guys.
But you didn't miss this weather, right?
I lost it. I totally lost it.
Oh. Well, you gotta find
Should we talk about how many problems the Bills have, or are we just going to leave
No,
that
I don't want to
tonight?
talk about the Bills tonight.
That's a tire fire. Richie Incognito. What the hell?
Just straight trolling.
What are you going to say? It's about Vegas.
It's a city. It's in the desert, Nevada.
Actually, the Golden Knights don't even play in Vegas. They play outside of Vegas. Paradise, yeah.
On Twitter today, some people going back and forth about if they win the Cup this year, it looks bad for the league. I think it's a terrible take. What do you guys think about expansion team coming in here and lighting the world on fire?
The NHL can't even send their own broadcast teams to playoff games. Their national feeds are grabbing the Caps broadcasts.
Yeah,
it's
the Caps,
unbelievable.
The Flyers game 4 tomorrow will be their local broadcast for sure. The Sharks tonight will be the Bay Area feed, right? The Winnipeg, Minnesota series was the CBC feed, right?
Just imagine another sport doing that. Imagine the NFL rolling into a wild card playoff game and having CBS instead of it being, their team, Phil Simms, whatever. It's John Murphy and Mark Kelso.
I'm just imagining Milwaukee Bucks fans getting to hear about Tommy points from Tommy Hyson during a Celtics podcast. That would be fantastic.
Like, how Bush League is it? They just continue. The NHL continues to outdo itself with how stupid they are. And my point is, everyone loves the Vegas story. I'm not rooting for Vegas, but I love the story. And it's if they were to go all the way and win it, it'd be freaking awesome.
Can I just say a moment of real talk here? I think the NHL is going to go to Fox when their TV contract comes up.
They need to get up NBC.
Nobody talks about Fox. I think
is the gold puck coming back?
Being spread across USA and CNBC
and the Golf Channel.
I
mean,
finally hockey on the Golf Channel.
I mean, playoff hockey on the Golf Channel. And the joke always is they're not in the playoffs, they're going to play golf.
Right.
I just think it's funny.
And I was really disappointed that it wasn't just a foursome from the Coyotes just whacking the balls around out there.
Good news, though. I think I finally figured out the trick talking to this microphone.
You got it? Just talking to the side of it.
Yeah, not the front of it.
Nope.
You're talking to this. Much better.
Sound like sex, right?
Only took an hour and a half.
Can we go back over and do the whole thing again? Because now I sound like...
let's just rewind this again. No, I think Fox. I think you go to Fox, FS1, FS2, and then you throw a playoff game or two on like FXX or whatever it is.
No, not 3 X's, just to be clear.
Oh, okay.
That's
Sorry.
not
No,
the
I think
same
he
thing.
gave 4 X's. So.
I know, but if you go to FXXX, it's not.
That's not
probably
it. I
the same
apologize.
I
thing.
just can't see any more Wednesday night rivalry nights between the Flyers and Calgary.
Right.
Like,
Wednesday night rivalry.
It was
Blue
almost
Jackets.
better when it was on OLN and Versus because
Well, that was the same
At least when it
channel.
was Bush League, it felt like it should be because hockey was on the Outdoor Life Network.
Well, it was the same channel.
I
It was
know.
just NBC's
Then
branding.
it became right, but
Well, most of them grew up playing on the pond, so
Right.
I guess there's that connection. But
Two
done
things
with
to put in
NBC.
your head, and we'll leave with you. One, Gus Johnson calling a hockey game. Two, Sean Hannity doing the lead into a hockey game. Can we make it happen, please, Jesus up in heaven?
if
Thank
Gus
you.
Johnson called the hockey game, oh my god, I love Gus Johnson. Number one.
Here's Eichel
Real loud.
moving around, looking, probing.
During the last playoffs, the last Winter Olympics.
Mhm. That was only like a couple months ago.
No, I mean the one before that. I apologize.
that one way back in
You know what?
January.
Yeah, you know what? Apology not accepted.
Well, screw you.
wow, wow, wow.
Go ahead.
The Olympics before the,
The
recent
2014
one.
Olympics.
Yeah, it was that one.
It was in
I
Sochi.
took my laptop to work so I can watch
you.
the USA game. And
Yeah, that was awesome.
they had like a British play-by-play guy calling the game,
Hello,
and it was
Governor.
incredible. It was like the when a soccer guy scores a goal, but
Yeah.
it like through the whole thing. I loved it. Like
Yeah.
I prefer it over. I don't know. I'm not saying anything.
I'm just going to complain that the games that we get on CBC are not HD
I'm just sick of
because
hearing
Hockey
Mike.
Night in Canada, I don't get to like listen to Jim Houston while watching in HD, so I don't want to watch it.
I'm so sick of Mike Emery. I like Mike Emery. He's good. He's got his moments, but
Doc, I can't
Doc-
stand
like
him.
I hate how he's like he's telling an epic story. He slings the puck around the boards that are right.
Was
But
he
the
has-
dude's always like
he has-
7/8 of a minute to go. I'm like, what are you saying?
He has like 65 different words for shot
Yeah.
or something.
You know what
A drive wide of the cage. I want to punch him in
You know
the
what?
teeth.
You know what I do miss a lot. Though I miss Harry Neal on the Sabres broadcast.
Yeah.
Took that shot from,
And they
from
they
17
just
feet out.
I don't know what network it is, just announced that Bob Cole's not doing playoff games.
CBC.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they cut him, which is, I mean,
It's just Harry Neal just always rattling off random measurements. Took that shot from 17 feet away.
Oh, yeah, Doc and
24.
Millsy, you know, Sidney Crosby, Nova Scotia boy, good boy, plays league in the Ontario Hockey League, good kid. That's what we get from Pierre.
I could literally hear Harry Neal and JP Dumont with a 27-foot shot. I'm like,
Yeah, it was amazing. I loved it.
You know where 27 feet is on
Right,
the ice. That
exactly.
clearly marked 27-foot meter.
Nice tip from Vanek, 9 feet away from the net.
That's what Fox should do. Fox should just put a bunch of rulers on the ice. And I think that would be
Yeah, bring
innovative.
him back
could
to
just-
rolling puck.
No, I'm just talking about literally like wooden rulers just in a straight line across the. So we
You
can
can just
monitor.
you can just superimpose the lines nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
like
it's
the
just
first down
CGI.
marker.
The glow puck wasn't that terrible of an idea. They tried to bring in the common fan.
They tried
Pre-
they tried to innovate
Saber-
back in the
Pre-HD.
90s.
Saber Stars was, I think, if not the last one on Fox.
Didn't
was
they
second
introduce
to
it with
last.
an All-Star game? Wasn't where it was brought in?
Oh yeah, no, yeah. I was
was
just
an
saying
All-Star
the last Fox. I think Sabres Stars was on Fox, and
Yeah.
I think the next year was that Avalanche Devils.
What are chances ESPN gets in? They wanted it before, but weren't offering as much as NBC.
It's interesting because this
'Cause
new
they were the second high
this new
bidder.
ESPN Plus package that they're offering. It is interesting because ESPN acquired all the Fox regionals, but Fox still retains FS1, FS2, and all of their like major cable properties. So who knows, man?
I just remember when
don't
NBC
know.
won the bid at $2 billion, ESPN was second.
Yeah.
I love. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, not just ESPN needs content, but they have between the NBA and college basketball, they have
Right.
so much between the months of November and April, which is when you want to see it. And with them carrying the NBA playoffs as well, I think it's a rough fit. You're going to be getting pushed down to ESPN
Ocho.
2, and you're going to see a
The
lot
Ocho.
of games starting on ESPN News. If that's interesting to you, then fine. But unless they rebrand ESPNU as something else, I would go to Fox.
But to the casual fan, is ESPN News that much different than finding a hockey game on MSNBC or whatever?
Oh,
on a-
just-
you know what I mean?
How can you find NBC
If you were
Sports
looking
Network?
for it, you
Yeah.
would find it. If you weren't, you wouldn't either way, probably. Anyways,
At the counter teams we go home.
Okay.
I'm just happy the Sabres found a replacement for whenever Jenner decided to hang him up and Dan Dunleavy. Because I was not.
Dunleavy's good.
I was
I don't
not
care
a
what
fan of
anybody
Kevin
says.
Sylvester, and I was dreading Jenner retiring 10 times more than
No,
Like,
Dunleavy's
I think he does
pretty
good. Yeah.
he does a good job, and he already works 30 games a year anyway.
And he does the intermission anyway. Like even when he's not doing the play-by-play, he's in the arena doing the live
he's like
pregame,
the arena. Yeah,
ringside, and he
Yep.
does the intermission recaps.
Yep.
So
he does a good job.
Let's go home. I guess
right.
we'll come back next week and do a little pre-draft fun stuff. Maybe we'll get someone cool on. Got a couple things in the works for that. A couple guys, a couple interviews, and then we'll come on. Maybe do you want to do a draft show? Should we do a draft show during the draft? Like,
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
I think
Talk about it.
yeah, we'll talk about it. I think I want to do it. Never mind.
there's going to be a
My
bombshell
ideas.
trade before our next pod.
Did you see that rumor that someone posted?
But it's so stupid because it has the Browns moving out of 1 and giving up 4. It's never happening.
What was it?
Why would they do
What-
both? The Bills to 1, the Browns to 2.
And
the Browns
Giants
lose
to 4.
Yeah, and then why would the Browns ever do that?
Yeah,
Lose number 1 and 4. It's dumb.
You have all the power at number 1 because if you like 3 of the quarterbacks, just take Saquon Bradley or Bradley Chubb.
How about
and then you're
Saquon
guaranteed
Barkley?
to st-
You
and then
could
just
take
stay
that
at 4.
guy. You could take Saquon Bradley, but he's probably not as good as Saquon Barkley.
No. Did I say Bradley?
Yes.
Let's wrap it up, please.
Let's go.
Good night.
Goodbye.